Hello guys, welcome to another episode of What's Next. Alright, so today I'm going to be talking about Elder Scrolls 6. Now I don't know if this is a surprise or anything to you guys about why this episode came next, and to do this I'm playing Elder Scrolls Online, and just to start out, to me, Elder Scrolls Online isn't a bad game. It's just a game I would casually play. Just it's nice to play with friends every now and then. It's also nice to just kind of play on your own and have a little fun every now and then if you just need to kill some time. It's one of those games for me, and I find it actually kind of fun to play. But besides that, we're gonna go talk about Elder Scrolls 6 today. Elder Scrolls 6 would be obviously the sixth installment of the Elder Scrolls series, and the last installment being Skyrim. Now, Skyrim was absolutely hands down my favorite game of all time, just ahead of The Last of Us, which was the last episode that this was based off of. And I gotta say that I've been playing. I got my Xbox 360 in 2012. Yeah, because I got Assassin's Creed 3 for I got Assassin's Creed 3 when it came out, and I played it when I got on winter break when I got it. And then I got Skyrim as a free download with my Xbox 360. And at first I didn't want to play it, I didn't like it. Then as time went on, I gave it a second chance, and I fell in love with the game. And Skyrim was absolutely amazing. I played it for a long time. And believe it or not, like even last summer, I actually still found new places to explore and discover, and I thought I'd seen it all in that game, and I still found new quests, a bunch of stuff. And sadly, if it wasn't for a couple of mishaps, like a couple of glitches, I would actually have all the achievements in the game, but now I only have 72 out of 75, and I really don't want to replay the game to get there. And one achievement I actually don't have is killing a legendary dragon, but that's because you have to be level 70, and I'm only level 68 or 65, and so I don't have my 360 up here, so I can't keep fighting for that. But that's beyond the point. Elder Scrolls 6. There are so many possibilities Elder Scrolls 6 could have been and could be, and there's a lot of rumors out there of what it could have been, what it could be, and a lot of those rumors have been disproven, like Redguard or Argonia. Which Redguard would be pretty interesting to see, considering they've never been to Hammerfell yet, which is where the Redguards are based out of. No one's been to Hammerfell yet, and I don't know if the Elder Scrolls Online touches it or not, but it'd be interesting to see how. I think the best portion for a story there, and I actually did study up on the lore and everything. I think the best place to go with the Hammerfell story for Redguard would actually be I believe it's in the third era with Tiber Septim. I don't remember what era the Septims are in. I want to say it's the third era, but when the Septim Empire and the Redguards start feuding a little bit, and this is when it's when the Aldmeri Dominion actually starts to rise up and challenges the Empire as the fact that it challenges the Empire pretty much. And as the war goes on, you see other provinces start to fall, and Hammerfell wants to stay loyal to the Empire, and despite all what's going on, the Empire still pulls out and leaves Hammerfell pretty much to fall. And the Redguards are left to fight on their own. And not to mention, they're left to fight on their own. They actually win and defeated the High Elves of the Aldmeri Dominion. So what goes to show for that? They're not going to go join they don't join the Empire after that, because the Empire left them to die. So what they do is create their own society, and I feel like that's a very good story they could work off of, and I feel like that'd be very, very interesting to do. And even possible they can move on into the future. Like, you always saw in Skyrim how they always thought as the White Gold Concordat as a inevitable treaty to lead to another war, and another war would create chaos for everyone on both sides, and it would be cool to see something like maybe the Red Guards want to actually favor the Empire again, and maybe the Empire is going to take them back now that, and that would be very, very, very interesting. But that would also mean that they had to rank some things as canon and some things as some choices not. And as time goes on with Skyrim, if you do the Dark Brotherhood quests, you eventually kill the Emperor Titus Mede. So, is the Mede dynasty still going to be around if they go into the future, or are they going to leave that to hang? And that's some of the things that they're going to have to. That's some of the things that are going to be challenging to do, because they're going to make certain things canon, certain things not. So that's a great interesting thing for me when it comes to terms of Redguard. And I know they denounced Redguard, Bethesda denounced Redguard, which made me kind of sad because there were so many possibilities you could have done with it. And then Argonia, which I seen Argonia. I didn't really get too hyped about it. I didn't think it was gonna be much of a thing in the first place. I thought it was just gonna be another. I thought that was a rumor, because Argonia, the Black Marsh is where the Argonians live. The Black Marsh isn't exactly the greatest of places to form a story, because I mean, as much as I know, there's not a lot of story behind it, and it's interesting, but it's not. I mean, I guess you can go really far back to the point where the Argonians rise up from being slaves, because the Argonians were slaves to the elves. I want to say they were slaves to the Dark Elves. I'm not sure. I want to say it was the Dark Elves, but I know they were slaves to one of the elves, and they ended up rising up and revolting against their rulers and pushing out the elves out of the Black Marsh. So I guess that would actually prove to be a very good story if they pushed out. If that was a story about rising up in rebellion and trying to create the slave revolt into an eventual province of Tamriel. And that's pretty much as I can think on Argonia. And those both theories have been disproven as just fan theories and fan-based opinions. So I don't know what you guys think about that, but for me, that leaves more room open to do other things. So recently, there's been the theory of a second Skyrim, because one of the writers or something of the sort said something about, we're not the kind of company that's going to create Skyrim 2, and a lot of people that I know of sat there and said, whoa, why would he say Skyrim 2 if they weren't going to make Skyrim 2? Which is a good thought. Why would they say Skyrim 2? That means they thought about it, at least making a Skyrim 2, making a sequel. So in my opinion, would they make it? Honestly, a Skyrim 2 would be very interesting. There's so much left untouched with Skyrim that you could fill with anything pretty much, and I agree that a Skyrim 2 would be a very, very interesting take on a lot of things. That it would fill some gaps between the Dark Brotherhood. How do they stay on the rise, or is the Dragonborn going to still be alive? Are they going to go into the future of the Dragonborn? Are they going to... What's going to happen with the Civil War is the big question too. What happens to the Thieves Guild? What happens to the Mage Guild? What happens to everything? And in terms of the Civil War, I think that'd be interesting, because it would make certain places, it would make certain things canon and not. Because if they would make the Stormcloaks win, then the Stormcloaks would have control of it. Or if the Empire wins, it's back inside Imperial control. And for me, that's cool either way, because I have some pretty good ideas for when it comes down to this. It just comes down to whether or not it actually happens. And as for other theories, like Skyrim 2, it's just, it leaves so many open-ended theories that I believe could be fixed on. And I want, as much as I do want a Skyrim 2, I don't think Bethesda really isn't the company to capitalize on certain sequels, especially when it comes, or not certain sequels, when it comes to that kind of style of game. Like, look at Fallout. Fallout 3 and 4 have some connections, but they're not entirely the same. Like, there's a different story, and yes, Fallout 3 or Fallout 4 is a sequel of Fallout 3, obviously, but they're not the. They did it somewhere else. They did put the story somewhere else. They had a whole new plot, and they developed a whole new idea. Whereas I feel like if they did a game that was a sequel to Skyrim, which I do expect them to do, then I feel like it's going to involve the events that happen in Skyrim, so they're gonna have to make some things happen, but they would have to, I'm trying to think of the word, well, either way they're gonna have to make things canon and stuff. So I think the best thing to do for this possible thing is actually do what BioWare did with Dragon Age. I think they need to set up a system where because the last game that came out for the Elder Scrolls was on last generation, was on the 360 and PS3. So I believe that if they ever want to keep things kind of what players want, they need to do what BioWare did, where they created a system where you went online and put in what you did in the story mode in each game. Like for Dragon Age, they had a Dragon Age. I'm trying to think of what it's called. Forge. It's not across the top of my head, but you put in your information for the history, and then once you're done, it saves it and links it to your account on BioWare, and then you go to play Dragon Age Inquisition, and you type in your account and you connect your PS4 account with your BioWare account, and that history you saved for what you did, it gets transferred on to Dragon Age Inquisition, and you can continue on the Dragon Age story as you played it. And I feel like if Bethesda does that, that is perfect, because then everyone's decisions mattered going into the next game, and they can do what they did for Oblivion and just completely make another story like they did for Skyrim, and just completely make another story somewhere else in Tamriel. But if they were willing to do a Skyrim sequel, I believe that doing this in a sense of like how BioWare did it is the best possible way to do it, because then players get to choose what they want, and that's why I like Skyrim so much, because decisions matter, and that's why I like Dragon Age so much, because decisions mattered. So certain decisions in Skyrim that you picked would influence the game, and it would be very, very cool to see, like, maybe the Stormcloaks actually won the rebellion and took control of Skyrim. How would that mean for the Empire? How is the Empire going to stand now that they got an enemy at their backside? And how is the Aldmeri Dominion going to capitalize on this advantage of the Empire's weakness of just falling to a group of rugged rebels who decided they weren't going to handle the elves anymore? So that's a very interesting story they could develop off of that. Or vice versa, the Empire quelled the rebellion and managed to stay significant enough to hold a presence in Skyrim, and now you have an Imperial Legion, an entire legion that's been hardened by war. And what if the Aldmeri Dominion sees this as a threat and tries to attack the Empire again? Not only would that create tension, all the elves would face all-out unification of the Empire, because Skyrim would unify under the Empire to take out the elves, because that was the original goal in the first place. Now, those are really good theories, but then there's also places they haven't done, like Elder Scrolls Elder Scrolls Arena, the first one, I don't know exactly where. I think it took place all around Tamriel, but I know Elder Scrolls 2 took place in High Rock, because it took place in Daggerfell, which is in High Rock, and it's where the Bretons are from. And then Elder Scrolls 3 was obviously Morrowind, and then Elder Scrolls, which was the Dark Elves, and I think Elder Scrolls 4 was in Oblivion, which is in Cyrodiil, which is the Imperials, and then there's Skyrim with the Norms with Elder Scrolls 5. Now, Elder Scrolls 6, we already talked about Hammerfell, we already talked about the Black Marsh. That leaves 3 places, the possibility to go. And if you count Elder Scrolls Online, because Elder Scrolls Online, you begin in the Somerset Isles and you only have 2, but we're going to include the Somerset Isles in for a single player story. The Somerset Isles would be interesting because you get to see the rise of the Aldmeri Dominion. That's a great story. How did the Aldmeri Dominion get there? What happened when they first contacted the Imperials? Because at one time, the Septim Dynasty took control of Somerset Isles. How did they get free from that? How did they get free from the Empire, and how did they get to be the Aldmeri Dominion? And how did the Aldmeri Dominion get to power? That's a great story too, and those are 2 things you can go off of a lot and make a possible very, very, very good story. And how did the tension, or how did the war actually break out too, is a very good story as well. But how did the Great War break out between the Empire and the Dominion and stuff like that? That's also a very possible good story they can do. And then in terms of Valenwood, I don't really have much to go off on Valenwood. That's the another province that they went off of. So I can't really say much about that, but going into Ellisware, which is where the Khajiit are from, I feel like that's a very interesting story, because everyone I've talked to that played Skyrim or Oblivion or something of the sort said they were always a Khajiit when they played. And Khajiit, I feel like, are the fan favorite of the characters and stuff like that. And so, in the end, they could put a very good story in there, and how the Ellisware Confederacy get to be, and how did the Dominion get control of Ellisware and stuff like that? Because before the Empire fell, or before the Empire started shrinking, it used to have control of the entire continent of Tamriel, and now they barely have hold of Skyrim. Well, they own Cyrodiil, that's the capital province, but they barely have hold of Skyrim and High Rock. How did they lose? How do they lose Ellisware would be a good story and stuff like that. And how did the Confederacy get to be instead? How did it join the Aldmeri Dominion? And then all out scenarios, and that's in terms of basing it in a province, but in all out scenarios, I think they should do is the Great War would be the best they could possibly do in terms of scenarios of a story, because the Great War would be so cool and interesting to see, especially on next gen technology. And the Empire used to be so large. Another scenario is, how did the Empire shrink and what did they do? How did they react? Because the Empire lost both the Somerset Isles to the Aldmeri Dominion, and then they took both Valenwood and Ellisware. And then what did the Empire do about Hammerfell? Not to mention, like, what happens to Black Marsh and Morrowind after it falls? Does Morrowind ever leave? Does it stay in the just devastated state after the eruption of the Red Mountain? And then what do the Argonians do about it? And then there's just so much you can go off of and continue on that I think that needs to be and should be answered. And then, not to mention, there's also, you can go back into the first era or so when Ysmir, his son was what I'm trying to say is, like, Ysmir, I'm pretty sure I'm saying it right, Ysgramor, but whatever. But when he returns from Atmoria and stuff like that, I believe that's where he's from. What does he do? Because he arrives in Skyrim, obviously, because he created Windhelm. How does he establish that? How does he establish the Nord presence in Skyrim? And that would be a good story as well. And what happens to the Snow Elves? How do the Falmer get pushed into becoming Falmer? that is a very good answer as well, or not answer. That's a very good story as well. How did the Falmer become the Falmer? And that'd be also the first time you actually see snow elves that aren't Falmer, and you see it's not gonna be the first time because you also see the the remaining two snow elves that are civilized. And I'm using air quotes. I don't know why that aren't Falmer, in the Dragonborn DLC. But what happens to like what pushed the Falmer underground and how did that happen? Or even do a story on how the dwarves or the dwarven people, what happened to them because they suddenly disappeared and left all the ruins. That's a very good, interesting story you can go off of too. But back to Ysgramor, he had a war and drove the snow elves against the snow elves pretty much, and drove the snow elves out, and then conquered all of Skyrim. Well, what happens? Because he also creates the first empire based in Skyrim. So what happens to that empire, and why does it fall so easily and so quickly? And I think that's a very interesting story they can play off of. But you know, that's just again a maybe. So again, now going into other things like towards more Skyrim related, I guess. What about the Dragon War, and how did the dragons end up getting defeated, and what caused the humans to rise up? What caused the eventual breaking point and stuff like that? And then you would see the return of Alduin, and you would see maybe a Dragonborn. You never know. Those are all very good, interesting plots that I feel like are good enough to make the story. But for me personally, I would love to see a Skyrim sequel. That's for me personally, though. And I don't know if I ever said. I don't remember if I ever. Words are hard. I don't know if I said that I didn't like seeing a Skyrim sequel earlier, but I personally, I do want to see a sequel, and I actually thought of a very detailed story of how this could work. It would mean making things canon though, and so personally, I took the side of the Empire. I like the Empire, but what if the Empire did lose? I just got an invite. What if the Empire did lose the rebellion and it ended up coming back in just like a rebirth of the Empire, and maybe like a lost line of like for me, I made a lost line of I thought of a lost line of the Septum. Like maybe a Septum was actually like kind of like a bastard child type scene where he found out he was the son and wanted to go, like Oblivion. He found out he was related to the Septum, and he gave his life at the end of Oblivion to stop the Oblivion crisis. But what happens if there was another Septum on the line? Would the Empire still be as powerful as it was before the Mead? And so I think of it as the Septums kind of, since the Dark Brotherhood events do happen and they kill and end the Mead dynasty, so the Septum dynasty is kind of reborn through the bastard child, and he kind of reclaims the Empire and tries to reform the ranks and manages to conquer and reclaim his territories from the Empire's territories from the Elderly Dominion, eventually to the point where they only have Valenwood and the Somerset Isles under the Dominion's control, and then they turn their attentions back towards Valenwood, but they also have to deal with Skyrim, which is under Stormcloud control. Do they take Valenwood and leave to go claim the enemy at your backside, or to do something else? And so I thought of the ways like who would support the Empire, or the rebirth of the Empire in Skyrim. So it's personally, I believe the Blades could develop a satisfied foothold to help the Empire, because the Blades used to serve the Emperor of the Empire, and ever since they made the agreement with the Dominion, they stopped. So as far as I go, my theory is that what if the Blades ended up forming against the Stormcloaks? Like they ended up, starting a resistance a little bit, I guess. But for my theory is the Stormcloaks in in actual Skyrim, I hate any non-Nord, pretty much foreign peoples. So what happens when they start? For me, what happens is they start driving those non-natives out, and they start driving out the foreign people or foreign races, and start forcing them out, or they kill them and stuff like that. Kind of like this, sort of like the Spanish Inquisition in a sense, which isn't a good thing, obviously, but in terms that would be, for me, it would make a great story, where the Empire has to now show some sort of presence to help maybe save the day, but maybe then they don't have the manpower to do it, and so the Blades end up being the only force to kind of seem as a symbol of just protection, and not necessarily of peace and prosperity, but of sign of protection, because the Blades, they were dragon guards. They were meant to fight dragons, not fight a war. So they kind of get themselves thrown into there, and they don't know what to do at first. So at first they take in refugees because they feel the need to protect the people at that point, because there's no dragon threat anymore. They just feel the need that the people need to be protected from attacks. But then the Nords end up finding and raiding the Skyhaven Temple and taking out all the Blades except for a few. And those few that survived are gonna rebuild the Blades under a new faction, and they're gonna kind of seemingly try to get their revenge and eventually take over the rest of Skyrim. And as they go on through this, they start conquering a province by province as they go on, and eventually, by the time I don't know if you actually know this, but there's a path in Skyrim that actually leads to Cyrodiil. You can't go that way because there's an invisible wall that blocks you from going that way, but there's a way that leads to Cyrodiil. Eventually, when they conquer Cyrodiil, or not Cyrodiil, yeah, they conquer Cyrodiil, the capital. No, when they conquer Falkreath, it opens up that route to get in there freely, and they're gonna get an Imperial envoy, and they're gonna reform the Blades under a new legion, and then they're gonna become an Imperial Legion pretty much, and retake Skyrim. That for me is a great story, and I would love something like that. And honestly, I would love to write something like that. Many of you know I want to be an author. I've already stated that I want to be an author, and I would love to write that story, and I already have great ideas on it. But if you have any other questions about it, feel free to ask me. And personally, to me is going to be like the ultimate story, and that would lead to a great game to play. There's so many decisions and so many things to do that goes on with that. But it provides the linear stories that generally the Elder Scrolls games have. And I personally, it took me a long time to develop this idea, and I think it's a great idea. But then again, that's me creating it. And that's my theory of what would be good for an Elder Scrolls 6 game if they did a possible Skyrim sequel. But then again, there's also so many places you can go, and there's so many things you can do, and so many concepts that were brought up in this video. You never know. But we're reaching the end of the video now, and so I would like to say thank you for taking this all in. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed it, really. What are your thoughts on the Elder Scrolls 6? Do you agree with any of the theories I've thrown out there, or do you think there's going to be something completely different? Do you have disagreements with me? Please feel free to comment on them or ask questions on them. I will definitely try to get back to you as soon as I can. And as always, again, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you around.